We heard you needed some info on Gen Z and news. As resident Gen Z journalists, we got you covered.
Based on our research, there's 4 things you really need to know.
How we got here,
how Gen Z gets invested,
how to get eyes on the news,
and how to inspire action.
Come join us for a day in the life of college journalism students in Chicago. We started our day taking in the sights and the scenery of everyday Chicago life. We then went to Loyola University, where we interviewed students about how they get their news. As you can see, we filmed in a way that is quite different than today's news packages. We go back and forth from holding the mic to letting the person hold the mic on their own if they wish. As you can also see, our video is vertical rather than the horizontal version that most people are accustomed to. This is how people watch their news today, on TikTok, vertical, and with different interviewing techniques. There are still some aspects that are the same, like how I'm doing a voiceover right now. However, I sound more casual and not as formal as most news packages. We can even tell news stories like this. Using a green screen, I can explain what's going on here in the photo. My partner for this project, Yvette, and I are working on interviewing one of the news reporters at WGN. So this is another way that we can explain news. This technique also works for videos, so we can use this for both videos and pictures if we wanted to. So as you watch our news packages, we hope you keep in mind that they're going to be a little bit different than how we're used to seeing news packages today. The videos may be vertical, there may be different sounds or noises that we use, and the interviewing techniques might be a little bit different than what we're used to today. We hope you enjoy.
Hi, I'm Candice Guevara.
And I'm Yvette Galvez, and we're journalists for the Daily Universe at BYU.
So here's how. Getting news isn't the same as it used to be. The way people are consuming news is evolving.
Newspapers began in the 1500s. That didn't revolutionize until a century later with the start of radio news in 1920. 20 years later, the first television news broadcast was seen here in the US.
Fast forward to now, everyone's getting their news from...
I would say social media is the biggest way.
Social media.
At least our generation is.
Here at BYU, we're being taught to present using traditional broadcast methods. And within the past 5 years, we have also incorporated social media storytelling and are using platforms like Instagram and TikTok to share news content.
So along with a group of other journalism students, we were asked to investigate what Gen Z is looking for in their news and how to actually get Gen Z to, watch the news.
So we did our research and we visited Chicago to go talk to professors of journalism media at different universities there. We started out at Loyola University, we went to Northwestern University, the grounds of WGN itself, and the streets of downtown Chicago.
Compared to previous generations, studies show that Gen Z gets most of their news, 50% of their news, from social media.
Chip Brewster, who works for Nexstar, explained to us what he's been learning about social media.
The previous generation, the only options they had to them were to consume. Gen Z interacts with it. I mean, that by itself just interacts with it, whether it's commenting, sharing. You couldn't share a TV broadcast.
We then spoke with journalism professor Lee Hood from Loyola University.
Sometimes we may dismiss the interest of young people in news, and I think that that's misguided. I think young people are very interested in what's going on in the world today. They just have a different way of getting that information.
So it looks like news agencies are very aware of the popularity of social media. They're trying to incorporate it into their workflow by not only depending on TV broadcasts, but putting their news out on social media platforms. So what's the problem?
There's a lot still missing.
There's not an easy answer to that. People are choosing the media that they consume as opposed to being given that type of media.
So we chatted with Natalie Moore from the Medill School of Journalism at Northwestern University.
There's information overload and a lot of misinformation. So just because something is on the internet or on Instagram or on TikTok doesn't mean that it's news, and it doesn't mean that it's reputable.
Gen Z really needs some primers on some big issues. So for example, when the situation in the Middle East broke out last October, they weren't getting that basic history from the news.
We then asked these experts how to adjust, and they gave us a few different answers.
It's not going to go back to print or traditional news.
It's a different kind of screen, so there's different ways that you frame things. And a lot of people are not necessarily watching with the sound on.
I might speak differently, more casually or conversationally on a Facebook Live than I would on a traditional media broadcast, which actually may appeal to a certain type of viewer and make me seem more credible or more approachable.
Media literacy is, I think, the first step in getting young people to consume more.
If you're going to do something that's highly interactive, you need to tell them that. You need to show them how it works.
So very insightful. But now let's get down to the nitty-gritty. We went to the universities and public places in Chicago to see if Gen Z was saying the same thing.
Do you think that there's anything that maybe news stations can do to attract more Gen Z viewers to them?
Well, obviously TikTok, but I think that they're doing that already. I would say like making it shorter. Like I feel like our attention span is a little less.
I don't feel like Gen Z is very engaged in the news. You know, I think that there's a general pessimism and disinterest and distrust there.
I mean, a lot of the news channels, like the popular ones, or at least the Western ones, they're really like biased.
It can be daunting to try and like read through a bunch of long news stories.
They don't really like reference a lot of Gen Z like things from social media, so I guess that's why they just don't pay attention to it
like they don't connect with Gen Z, basically.
Yeah, basically. It's very serious, and Gen Z is very like unserious.
I've always felt like news stations were very like formal and geared towards like older people.
I just don't like watching news in general because it's always negative.
A lot of like the news stuff is more like real world problems, like current world problems. So a lot of like Gen Z, they're like, oh, like that's for the adults.
So similarly to what experts are sharing, Gen Z is saying they need not only more presence on social media platforms, but easier access to information they're looking for through shorter packages and other features on social media. Gen Z is also asking for more interaction and relatability from news presenters. The news is too serious or negative, and it's not Gen Z enough. And last, we're seeing an issue with trust. Not only Gen Z, but many are worried the news can be too biased. This also raises the question, do we need to teach viewers to be more media literate?
The rest of our group will dive into the most important aspects of what Gen Z needs.
They'll explain the why and how to introduce these new findings into news packaging.
See you later.
Bye.
Hello, I'm Elise Clark. I'm 26. I'm originally from California, and I'm a journalism student at Brigham Young University.
I'm Audrey. I'm 24 from Utah, and I'm also a journalism student at BYU. We're looking at how Gen Z would like to consume the news. WGN, a professional news organization based in Chicago, reached out to our university to collaborate with us to research how Gen Z students would like to receive the news.
So, how does Gen Z like to get their news? Is that through traditional news outlets like the New York Times, NPR, or is it through social media, Instagram, TikTok, Twitter, or is it through a Netflix documentary, or is it through independent journalists or influencers? Do we like it in videos, articles, bingeable podcasts, bite-sized TikToks?
The way we get our news is changing and evolving each day. We've been doing research with 6 other students and 3 professors, and we all went on this incredible 9-day trip to Chicago.
While in the Windy City, we gathered research and visited WGN. And I'm not saying we didn't have any fun in Chicago, we definitely squeezed that in. But when we were there, we visited a couple different Chicago college campuses to ask Gen Zers themselves how they get their news.
Probably on TikTok.
Passively through social media.
Unfortunately, social media.
X, formerly known as Twitter. TikTok. Mostly off TikTok. I know that sounds crazy, but like, they have news channels on there from social media.
We were also able to speak to a longtime journalist at WGN about her experience connecting with Gen Z audiences and how she's seen journalism evolve during her career.
I think social media, to me, is actually very useful. These are the stories that I'm working on. This is why maybe you might be interested in a newscast. And hey, here's something that I did over the weekend. I think there's still ways to say, you know, I'm a relatable person and I spend time in the community and this is what I like to do. And hey, by the way, also I'm doing the story, you know, I'm doing Teacher of the Month today. It's airing tonight at 9 p.m. Because I think, you know, with local news and when you look at the demographic, it's skewing older. There's no way around that.
A whopping 74% of Gen Z gets their news off of social media daily, with 93% doing so on a weekly basis. Well, the mystery that Audrey and I are specifically trying to crack is how Gen Z can relate to the journalists or reporters giving them their news.
We wanted to know what level of relatability Gen Z would like to have with their news reporters and how they'd like to get the news.
I'm not going to trust somebody in news who's not openly invested.
Maybe make it more like Gen Z vibe, I would say.
They want to do clips
on TikTok, if they want to do Instagram Reels, stories, what have you, they still can. But I think having venues where it's more informational, even if it's less Gen Z people happen to go on it, I think it's still valuable.
The news is pretty serious, I feel like, but when it's just like super depressing, like hard facts, nobody really pays attention to that stuff. Like, I'll scroll past it. I don't want to know about that.
A lot of news broadcasters are out of touch, and I think a lot of them are highly political.
Maybe more relatable, like some of the guys on TV, it's just like, it doesn't feel real.
Just trying to like look at their sources and like if they're actually saying like what is true.
Honestly, I take it with a grain of salt. Make it super accessible. I feel like a lot of people don't watch like cable TV.
I like the guys that are like really there.
Like a true crime, like podcast or true crime person, right? You see them a lot, they post a lot of things, you start to trust them in a sense. It's like kind of like familiarity in a sense.
Okay, I need to take a break. Let me scroll on TikTok super quick. I think that's like a good way to see them.
Probably show a lot of facts from news outlets, like articles and stuff, or like clips from the news.
Parsons conducted a study with 36 students ages 18 to 25 in Vancouver, Canada, and found that first, Gen Z prefers to have the news in a concise, engaging, multimedia format that matches the media platform they're finding it on.
They also want images and videos in the news to make the news appear authentic and real.
The group agreed that the tone of the reporter should match the perceived seriousness of the topic. They like an informal, peer-to-peer voice that they can relate to, one that matches the sense of humor and tone of social media itself.
They also want the news to be delivered in a creative way, and preferably from people their own age. An example brought up in the study is the TikTok account Real Bikini Bottom News, where the talking fish from SpongeBob breaks the news to the audience.
Breaking news! Will Smith just slapped Chris Rock in the face at the Oscars!
While an older audience may find this ridiculous, it grabs Gen Z's attention and makes them seek out more information about a real piece of news. Another success story when it comes to TikTok news is The Washington Post, who started having younger journalists generate creative, funny, positive, and trendy TikToks to deliver a daily dose of real news.
We gotta talk about this headline. It's not okay and I won't stand for it. Sorry. Let me get in a journalist mode. There. One analyst told the Post that teenagers to adults in their mid-40s are more likely to choose gummy, fruity, and sour candy.
Audrey and I decided we'd try out this news TikTok format for ourselves and take an event in Chicago to cover in a way we think Gen Z would like.
Here's what we put together.
We're here at Hyde Park on the University of Chicago's campus, and you could say people are jazzed to be here. This is the 17th annual Hyde Park Jazz Festival, where music lovers come together to enjoy the rhythm of the blues.
Jazz encompasses so many forms of music, R&B, traditional African music.
This is Beverly, a born and bred Chicago native. She comes to the festival every year for a very special reason.
I actually came to celebrate my birthday. Every last Saturday of September is the Hyde Park Jazz Fest, and I'm out here.
Beverly and her loved ones definitely know how to party, and jazz has a way of bringing everyone together. One of the local performers featured this year is Alex Lombre.
Yeah, I used to play at this club called Room 43. It burned down, sadly, but it was such a fire club. When I was first playing there, that's when I first felt the Holy Spirit in a jazz club.
Alex was only 14 years old when she discovered her passion for jazz. The Hyde Park Jazz Festival was one of the first events she ever performed at.
A lot of that diversity and depth in musicianship comes from playing jazz.
I'm gonna pack my bag.
The Chicago style of jazz is known for its fast tempos, individual solos, using string, bass, and guitar, and the addition of the saxophone. We met another jazz fan who attends events like these to spread positivity. He goes by Bob the Bubble Man.
They approve of Hucky. Yeah? Yes. With a smile on their face. We need some more happiness nowadays.
Bubbles, like jazz music, is a way for humans to connect despite their differences, and a reminder to not take life too seriously.
Chicago and check out the jazz scene for yourself.
Thanks for watching our video. Let us know in the comments what you think Gen Z likes and what you'd like to see the future of journalism to be.
Welcome to Universe Live. My name is Brian Barba, and I'm your host. Today is December 5th.
No. That's not the plan.
What do you mean?
What I mean is we're not doing this the traditional way. We need to make it so everyone can see it here to here.
Do you want everyone to see it here?
Exactly. If Gen Z isn't going to come to the news, we got to bring the news to Gen Z.
The murals that line the walls of Chicago's communities are more than just art. They are stories. Stories that survive longer than the wall itself, even if it's demolished, painted over, or vandalized.
Art is one of the things you need to have if you're going to have a culture of a civilization.
Street art tour guide Luis Tubin says that the purpose of murals are for three things: expression, documentation, and communication.
One of the ways is that the artwork is going to be flags, if you will, of the community that's here. And it's going to tell the story of the past, but also of messages for today so that everybody could see it up on the wall.
It's going to be different in every neighborhood.
For example, if you're going to be in a Puerto Rican neighborhood, maybe you'll talk about Puerto Rican fight for independence. If you're going to be in a Mexican neighborhood, you might talk about the struggle of immigration at the border. You got traditional murals like the one we see behind me called Somos Pilsen by Pablo Serrano and Mateo Zapada.
This 4,000 square foot mural shows an evolving community.
Is also this way to remember, this way to honor, and to celebrate people in our community, and to also remember how they lived, and to think about how they died.
The Chicano muralist movement started in the 1960s in the southwest U.S. as a form of protest. It eventually spread to the street of Chicago. Muralist Hector Duarte has been part of this movement for decades.
What the Chicano movement attempted to do was to rescue the culture.
Duarte has seen new generations changing traditional muralism.
On one hand, they don't follow the intentions of conveying a message defending the community. And many times, there are painters who come from other communities, and to earn some money, they do what the new owners want.
But he's hopeful new artists are going back to the roots.
They're starting to realize that there's something more than just painting letters or their creations. Now, they're embedding messages about the community.
Duarte says the continuation of the muralism tradition will hinge on artists making meaningful art.
If the ties of the original movement aren't cut, then we are good. But if the ties are cut, we'll lose the purpose of muralism with meaning for the benefit of the community.
Artists say that gentrification is changing street art. Muralist Hector Duarte says developers are buying apartments and increasing the rent, which is displacing locals.
They are now charging double the rent for an apartment that used to house one family, and which now crams 3 families into the same space.
According to Duarte, newcomers are not integrating, and this disrupts the sense of community.
The new tenants are not married and don't build the community. They stay temporarily for a year or two and make no impact because they're not investing in doing so. They are not rooted.
The relationship between street art and murals is difficult. Street art tour guide Luis Tubin says developers encounter backlash.
The developer covered up all the murals that you would have seen outside the front, right? And then the community did not like this.
Now, developers are commissioning work that aims to replicate and keep the vibe of Pilsen. A curated vibe, albeit. Tubin thinks there are benefits to this.
We got corporations, we got businesses that would have never paid a Mexican to paint a mural, are now competing for artists to paint murals.
The new wave of up-and-coming muralists have a more structured support than artists in the past once did. Chicago native Aaliyah Martinez has dreamed of becoming an artist since she was 8 years old.
I know sometimes that's a tough thing to do, but it's really something that I want to pursue.
She's now got her first professional experience at 15 years old under professional muralist Mario Mena. An under-the-sea themed mural.
Basically, the restaurant itself serve seafood and whatnot, so you want to keep that type of theme.
Mario Mena also works as an art instructor at Yollocalli Art Institute. He had to forge his own path and now works to give back to the next generation.
I didn't have that resource, but I don't want anybody else to not have that resource.
Mario seeks to add his and others' life story in many of his murals by adding butterflies to symbolize metamorphism. It's a nod to the DACA community, which he himself is a part of.
But primarily it's a monarch butterfly because they fly from Mexico to upper North America as their path of migration. So it's kind of become a symbol of migration for the DACA community, which is millions of people here in the US who were born over there, brought as a kid.
As new challenges arise, artists will continue to find new ways and spaces to paint the stories of the local communities they represent.
Good evening. Tonight's top story, everything is awful.
Or is it?
Digital media hasn't changed the game, it's rewritten it.
Here's the truth. It's not your parents' media anymore.
A new side product of this environment is online information overload, and it's causing empathy fatigue, anger, and mean world syndrome.
The solution is solutions-based journalism, but not the way that your parents knew it, a new and updated way that targets Gen Z.
It's true that solutions journalism is standard, but it needs an update. Here's how.
Number 1, be willing to break down the issue. Gen Z is trying to be informed enough to take action. They're trying to get that information. Don't assume that your audience doesn't understand, but be willing to elaborate on key pieces of information that would be necessary for a Gen Z audience to know.
2, bring in young people. Lean on young people in the community who are working in the areas you are covering. They can inspire young audiences.
3, what is the problem? What is the big issue that Gen Z needs to be aware of in every news product that you produce?
4, now what? With the problem, is there something Gen Z can do in their community? Don't be afraid to highlight the organizations or bring in experts to talk about the next steps. Gen Z wants to be involved.
Now, here's an example of this.
Hi, I'm Belle. And I'm Molly. Now we're both really big fans of parks, which is why when we found out we were going to Chicago, we wanted to highlight some of America's most iconic parks and the organizations that are working hard to protect them.
We needed to get the inside scoop. We needed to talk to the locals.
So, let's talk about parks.
Nos encanta Chicago, el Millennium Park nos parece precioso y el Bean es una maravilla.
There's just something about Chicago parks.
Everywhere there's so many people here, thousands of people here that shop around. Big fan of it.
With more than 600 parks totaling 8,800 acres, Chicago's got no shortage of green spaces. But what makes Chicago parks truly special is the culture that Chicagoans bring to them.
It's a dim sum run, and there's so many runs, and there's so much fundraising all along Lincoln Park for so many good causes.
Why do you think it's important to preserve the green spaces that we have in Chicago?
It's a beautiful commonality that brings people together.
Even though there's always something happening at Chicago parks, not everyone has equal access to the opportunities.
We are known as a toxic donut. We sit in the center of the donut, and outside the perimeter is all these different type of pollution entities.
Because of the systemic pollution and lack of green space infrastructure, like park benches, people on the south side of Chicago haven't always enjoyed the great outdoors, but volunteers like Jack Nelson want to change that.
Really are bringing people who have been historically excluded from these walks into the forest and allowing them to feel not just physically included, but psychologically included.
To bring Chicago parks to more people, community organizations are working to address the issues of environmental equity.
The forest preserve and the 19 miles of waterway we got in our neighborhood has not been appreciated from my community because it was never nothing in there to appreciate. You know, things are being put in our forest preserve for people to enjoy the recreation of it.
But they say they can't make change alone. They are calling on young people to get involved.
Our goal is to build power for people and the environment.
We do a lot of work, so come out and volunteer with us. We're welcoming you with open arms.
They're asking for Chicagoans who love the parks to keep the good vibes rolling by volunteering and making a change.
There are lots of organizations that are working to help protect Chicago's parks.
If you're interested in learning more about the organizations that we mentioned, click the link in the description.
Get out of frame. Hey, go.
So there you have it. Gen Z wants the news, but in new ways.
They want to incorporate the good qualities of traditional news while still innovating with new media.
They want to build rapport with their reporters in authentic ways.
They want news available on the platforms they use.
And they want to take action by listening to well-researched suggestions.
Gen Z makes up 25% of the globe's population. Let's start making news for them. Bye.